welcome back. We are back in my series on Ezra. Y'all killed it on the last video, so I am so excited to be getting up Ezra 2. This one is 70 verses long, but I've only divided it into 5 chunks because of the way it's written. Just stick with me here. A lot of it's really easy. But just to recap, in the last chapter, we established that King Cyrus was allowing the Jews to return to Israel and to rebuild the temple and to restart their ways after they were conquered by Babylon way back when. And so this chapter is more about that and just kind of lists all the people who came back to Israel. So let's go ahead and start with verses 1 through 42. Now, these are the people of the province who came up from the captivity of the exiles, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had taken captive to Babylon. They returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to their own town, in company with Zerubbabel, Joshua, Nehemiah, Sariah, Reelaiah, Mordecai, Bilshan, Mispar, Bigvai, Rehum, and Bana. The list of the men of the people of Israel, the descendants of Parash, 2,172, of Shephatiah, 372, of Era, 775, of Parath Moab, through the line of Jeshua and Joab, 2,812, of Elam, 1,254, of Zadu, 945, of Zakkai, 760, of Bani, 642, of Bebai, 623, of Asgad, 1,222, of Adonikam, 666, of Bigvai, 2,056, of Aden, 454, of Ader, through Hezekiah, 98, of Bezai, 323, of Jorah, 112, of Hashum, 223, of Gibar, 95, the men of Bethlehem, of Netophah, 56, of Anathoth, 128, of Asmath, 42, of Kiriath, Jearim, Kephriah, and Beeroth, 743, of Ramah and Geba, 621, of Michmash, 122, of Bethel and A, 223, of Nebo, 52, of Magbish, 156, of the other Elam, 1,254, of Harim, 320, of Lod, Hadid, and Ano, 725, of Jericho, 345, of Shena, 3,630, the priests, the descendants of Jedediah, through the family of Jeshua, 973, of Amir, 1,052, of Pashur, 1,247, of Harim, 1,017, the Levites, the descendants of Jeshua, and Kadmiel, of the line of Hodaviah, 74, the musicians, the descendants of Asaph, 128, the gatekeepers of the temple, the descendants of Shallum, Ater, Talman, Akud, Hatita, and Shobiah, 139. Here are all the people it lists in detail who came back with the people to Israel. And so it divides them into 6 categories, being the descendants of Parash, the men of Bethlehem, the priests, the Levites, the musicians, and the gatekeepers of the temple. So the men of Bethlehem, at this time being the city of David, where David grew up and was still a very important city to Israel, but would later become the birthplace of Jesus. Bethlehem is just a very important place. And then the priests, the Levites, the musicians, and the gatekeepers of the temple are all temple workers. Because Ezra specifically takes a focus on the religious rebuilding of Israel after being taken over by Babylon. And so I just thought it was neat how it categorizes them into all these sections. And then we continue in verses 43 through 58. The temple servants, the descendants of Ziha, Hasufa, Tabath, Keros, Siah, Padon, Lebanah, Hagabah, Akuab, Hagab, Shalmai, Hannah, Giddel, Ghana, Rhea, Rezin, Nekoda, Gazam, Uzzah, Pashea, Besai, Asna, Meunim, Nephusim, Bakbak, Hakufa, Harhur, Bazluth, Mahida, Harsha, Barkos, Sisera, Tema, Neziah, and Hatpha, the descendants of the servants of Solomon, the descendants of Sotai, Hassapherth, Peruda, Jala, Darkan, Gidol, Shephatiah, Hatil, Pokherth, Hazabaim, and Amy, the temple servants and the descendants of the servants of Solomon, 392. So here are the temple servants and the descendants of the servants of Solomon, who it lists each individually by name, or in the case of the descendants of the servants of Solomon, it lists the servants of Solomon's names. And so, once again, I wanted to call out how special that makes them, that instead of giving a number by their category, it specifically lists all of them by name, showing how they're putting a new emphasis on the temple servants and a new emphasis on the servants of Solomon, who was their king appointed by God. And so then we see in verses 59 through 63, the following came up from the towns of Tel Melah, Tel Harsha, Kerub, Adon, and Immer, but they could not show their families were descended from Israel. The descendants of Deliah, Tobiah, and Nekoda, 652. And from among the priests, the descendants of Habiah, Hakaz, and Barzillai, a man who had married a daughter of Barzillai the Gileadite, and was called by that name. These searched for their family records, but they could not find them, and so were excluded from the priesthood as unclean. The governor ordered them not to eat of any sacred food until there was a priest ministering with the Urim and Thummim. So while at first glance this looks almost tragic that the Jews wouldn't allow in the people who couldn't prove directly that they were Jewish. But this is a huge step for the Jews, considering that a lot of the problem they had in the later years before Babylon conquered them is that they were intermingling and intermarrying with non-Jews and people who didn't follow God. And that was the main problem. So we see here that they're trying specifically and desperately to make sure that all the people among them are Jews, so that they don't repeat the mistakes of their past. And so, while they still let these unproven Jews move in to Israel with them and come back to Israel with them, it's different, and they aren't granted all the privileges of a proven Jew, which both allows them to welcome them and be hospitable, but also not sacrifice their culture and religion, which is the problem they had before. Then we see a brief summary of all this in verses 64 through 67. The whole company numbered 42,360, besides their 7,337 male and female slaves, and they also had 200 male and female singers. They had 736 horses, 254 mules, 435 camels, and 6,720 donkeys. So, while this number, at first glance, once again, looks really impressive, it's also to consider that this is an entire country and an entire people that's made up of solely 42,000, which is roughly about the size of two small cities. And that's just not optimistic. It's not a lot of people to fill an entire country. And that just puts an emphasis on how this isn't going to be an easy job of rebuilding Israel and rebuilding everything that they lost in Babylon. But it shows that these people are committed to do what they need to do and to return to the Lord. And then we round out the chapter in verses 68 through 70. When they arrived at the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, some of the heads of the families gave freewill offerings toward the rebuilding of the house of God on its site. According to their ability, they gave to the treasury for this work 61,000 darics of gold, 5,000 minas of silver, and 100 priestly garments. This, priests and Levites, the musicians, the gatekeepers, and the temple servants settled in their towns, along with some of the other people, and the rest of the Israelites settled in their towns. So here we see that the temple tax, or a fund, is taken up where everyone donates to the rebuilding of the new temple. And for this, they had a lot of money, and they had a lot of donations towards rebuilding the temple. And once again, this is very important because it once again shows the new emphasis that the Israelites were putting on rebuilding their relationship with God. It's acknowledging that they messed up and are trying to do better, in that they are giving their money and their time to the rebuilding of the temple. And it also shows that they've resettled these towns and that they're ready to build the temple. And that's what next chapter is going to be all about, is rebuilding the altar and then rebuilding the temple. And so that perfectly sets all of that up. But in the meantime, that is it for Ezra 2. Thank y'all so much for watching. And as always, see ya.